comes with its own way of dealing with the DOM. You almost never access it directly. You go through helper methods, usually functional from your JavaScript framework. Well, Dart set out from the beginning to set up a really clean DOM API so that you can use the DOM as you expect to find it and get real Dart types back. So in this case, we're going to try to open up a connection to the user's video and audio. So we call getUserMedia. You can see right away I'm using named arguments, so I know exactly what I'm asking for. Audio true, video true. And this is a long-running operation, so it's going to return a future. So I can do the same thing that I talked about a few minutes ago, where I can attach a callback and an error handler. Once I actually get my result, I can set up a new video element. Here's that cascade operator I talked about, so I can do a bunch of configuration. And similarly, I want to listen for the metadata loaded event, so I can just do .listen because it gives me a stream. And then finally, if I need to find something in the DOM, I can just use query selector, the new HTML5 style selectors, instead of having to worry about document.getElement by ID or using some framework call. So very clean DOM API. Here's another example. Many people have worked with the XML HTTP request. This is another one that almost every framework gives you their own mechanism for dealing with XML HTTP requests because the API is really confusing. Well, first of all, in Dart, we said, does anyone ever actually use XML with the HTTP request? Everybody uses JSON, right? So we drop the XML. It's just HTTP request. And we use that same approach to defining Dart APIs to make it actually really clean and usable. So I open it up with .request to a URL. I use named arguments, so I know exactly what I'm passing in. Method is post, send data is some encoded JSON. And again, it's a long-running request, so it's going to return a future. So I get my built-in asynchronous processing and error handling. So again, very easy API to deal with HTTP requests. All right, so I've written my first Dart program here. This is a program that has an input field where you can type your name, and the web page is going to wish the traveler farewell. So my program is, what's my program doing here? It's seeking out the button and attaching a click listener. And on the click, I'm going to take whatever somebody typed into the box and I'm going to set it to my inner HTML. So what's going to happen when this program actually runs? It's the first thing somebody's going to try. Of course, they're going to try injecting a script tag in here, right? And if I actually, in JavaScript, set inner HTML to a script tag, that script will execute, and I could be screwed. On Dart, when I run this, that doesn't happen. I just get the extra text, the script tag stripped out. And that's because Dart does sanitization by default. This is a really nice feature. It's also something you can override if you feel like Dart is constraining you and you really want to mess with the DOM contents as is. You can. It gives you filters to work with to do that. But by default, any access to the DOM is safe. And this means your programs by default are safe. All right, so now we've written a couple of Dart programs here, but you're probably thinking, well, I've got a bunch of existing JavaScript code, or maybe I've got a favorite JavaScript library that I want to use. So what about that? Do I have to just abandon all the JavaScript stuff I already have? Well, Dart has this JavaScript interop library. So here's an example of Google Maps. Anyone's used Google Maps API? It's relatively easy to just make a call to the API to set up a map. So all we're doing here is setting some options with a center, zoom, and map type, and then we go ahead and create the map. So this is what it looks like in JavaScript. In Dart, it's only a little bit harder. Basically, Dart gives me the ability to go through what it calls the JSContext and JS proxies to deal with JavaScript objects. So on the top there, instead of doing Google.maps, I do js.context.google.maps. And the js.context just says I'm accessing the global JavaScript namespace. And similarly, I can instantiate JavaScript primitive maps and arrays by doing jsmap or js.array. And then down on the bottom there, if I want to actually create a JavaScript object, I just do it through a js.proxy. And so I can use JavaScript libraries out of the box without much fuss at all. This is really powerful, because this gives me the ability to use all of the code that's already out there. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is pub. I talked earlier about how difficult it can be to manage dependencies in JavaScript applications. So Dart comes with a first-class package manager called pub. Pub allows you to create and publish your packages either to a global online repository or anywhere you like. You can put them on your own server. You can define versions for your packages, and you can also define dependencies in your packages to say you depend on some other third-party Dart libraries. And pub gives you some really simple commands to say pub install if you want to download and install those dependencies. And when you're ready to deploy your application, you can just do pub build, and it actually takes all your dependencies, compiles them into JavaScript for you, and gives you one binary that you can ship. So it makes it really, really easy to compile and deploy your application. All right, so that's Dart libraries. And I think I'm running a little bit low on time here, so I'm going to do a quick recap. We talked about syntax, we talked about semantics, classes, optional types. We went through the libraries. I tried to make the point that Dart is a batteries included platform, so you're not just starting from a raw language. But does all this actually make for a better front end? Well, let's see. We said that a front end has to be easy to write. And I think that with Dart syntax, we found that Dart programs are fairly easy to write. And with a really clean DOM API, you can write those programs pretty much without error. It's also easy to deploy. I talked about pub and the way that you can actually package all your dependencies together and deploy them in a single step. Easy to maintain. We talked a lot about refactoring. Because Dart has a first-class editor, and because it has real structured types, refactoring